Welcome to the Anxiety Coaches Podcast, a relaxing and informative show where we explore anxiety, panic, and PTSD, sharing how you can overcome them for life.
Aloha! Welcome back to the Anxiety Coaches Podcast. I'm your host and coach, Gina Ryan, and I am so happy to be with you again today as together we can consider the many ways to bring your mind and body back to its natural peace and calm. In today's episode, I want to talk a little bit about perfectionism and the idea that it might possibly be keeping you in an anxious state or keeping the anxiety cycle going. I read a great article by Dr. David Hanscom, and I will put a link in the show notes to the article in case you want to read the whole thing. I'm just pulling out a few key pieces that I thought were really related to our conversations here around anxiety. So Dr. Hanscom talks about perfectionism being felt by many as a virtue. And I know that. I hear this quite often. People will identify with being a perfectionist. And it's easy to say. I probably have said this about different things in my life myself. He says that it is reflected in the terms of high standards, excellent quality, and strong work ethic, etc. And so that's how we usually look at it. Many times we think that we have high standards, we have excellent quality work or strong work ethic, and that is how we are identifying ourselves as being a perfectionist. But he goes on to say that it is actually a disguised version of anger directed at oneself. These ideas actually become translated in our minds as we're not good enough, we have imposter syndrome, and why do I always do this? These are little snippets that I hear from clients and group members over the years. These are ways that we feel about ourselves, not good enough. And why do I always do this? And so we are disguising an anger at ourselves and coming around the other way and coming out as perfectionism. So holding yourself to these impossible standards is a way of remaining in a victim mode indefinitely. So this is where we can get really tied up in an anxious cycle because we are holding ourselves to impossible standards, and then we don't meet those standards and we keep ourselves knocked down as victims. Why do I always do this to myself? I can never achieve anything. If people only find out about who the real me is, they won't like me, and so forth. There's so many ways that this can come out. Dr. Hanscom says that these standards also translate into judgments of others as you project your views of yourself onto them. And we know that judgment and anxiety go hand in hand. This is a way that we can kind of get ourselves into a trap by judging ourselves or others and feeding our anxious fire. The most disturbing aspect of this issue is that all of this arises from the unconscious brain. The unconscious brain has hardwired circuits beginning from birth. You have no control over them and are unresponsive to the conscious brain. And this is where no matter how hard we try some things, we don't make a change, right? We've all experienced that. And also with our anxious thoughts or our anxiety flaring up, quote, out of the blue, this is all unconscious. This isn't from something you were thinking about or something that you were sensing in your life at the moment. these are things, as he puts it, hardwired circuits beginning from birth that are in the unconscious, and they are unresponsive to the conscious brain. And they have to be dealt with by reprogramming the unconscious brain. Now, I will tell you, Dr. Hanscom is very big on journaling, on actually getting the thoughts out of the mind onto the paper and letting those kinds of feelings out. So I wonder right now if you are having issues around perfectionism, if you feel like you can't even meet your own standards, none less the standards of the world around you, and these are maybe keeping you unconsciously even in an anxious loop. These are things we can think about and maybe loosen up a little bit on ourselves. This would be a great place to put it down in your journal if you are writing. One of the ways of journaling that I tell people to do is like the morning pages, and you can do it as long or as short as you are willing. I believe that Julia Cameron had often suggested 3 pages of morning pages, but it's just free flow, stream of consciousness. Let some of these things come up and out. Putting the pen to paper and letting it flow can really prime the pump to get the conscious mind a little bit out of the way and just let it go. Like, you don't need to use correct grammar. You don't need to watch your punctuation. You just let it rip, right? Doesn't even need to make sense because you're never going to read it again, and neither is anyone else. You can rip it up and throw it away. You just got some things out of you. So anyway, back to perfectionism and anxiety. Like, let these things out of you so that you are not holding yourself to unrealistic standards and putting those standards into place so that you can kind of hide behind not being good enough by really feeling that you are an imposter, those kinds of things. Or maybe you're just angry. A lot of perfectionism is covering up a lot of anger in my experience. So Dr. Hanscom goes on to say here that perfectionism may be most common, almost universal, a disguise of anger. He says, I had been raised with the idea that it was a virtue, and this perception was dramatically reinforced during my medical training. It was at the core of my burnout and journey into the abyss of pain, and I had no idea it was a problem until well after I had crashed and burned. End of Dr. Hanscom's quote. I really hope you heard that. This is what being stuck in an anxious pain cycle can do. The anxiety feeds the pain feeds the anxiety, and our perfectionism, which is tamping down some anger, can really throw us for a loop. So many people burn out. So many people crash and burn. And so if you feel like you are like on that trajectory, you may want to slow down and take a look at where you are pushing a little bit too hard. Perfectionism fits into the anger cascade in the following manner, and I believe this is true with anxiety also. Dr. Hanscom says a given situation, person, or you are less than your concept of ideal. When we are just not feeling that we're up to our own ideal or the people around us aren't, we get that like edginess, we get that irritation, which can feed our anxiety because we are sending off messages that things aren't right. There's something wrong here. Another one is that you blame one of the above for being less than perfect. The people, places, and things in your life are less than perfect, so something's wrong. And if we're so rigid with that, that feeds the anxious fire. He also says that you are now a victim of less than perfect. Oh my goodness, heaven forbid we should be less than perfect in this world where everyone around us, at least on social media, looks like they have it all together, right? We don't want to be left out. We don't want to be the one that is wrong. That's dangerous, to be left out of the tribe. So these things unconsciously are feeding our anxious cycle. He also says you will perpetually exist in some state of conscious or unconscious agitation. And there you go. That is it exactly. Bingo. An unconscious or conscious state of agitation. And what does that do inside us? Agitation is that something is amiss. Things are not as they should be. We have to keep scanning the horizon for where the problem is. Now, I want to talk about letting some of this go and what we can do about it. But first, I want to thank today's sponsor, Naked Nutrition. I want to tell you about Naked Nutrition's Vanilla Pea Protein Shake that I am enjoying right now. There's no artificial sweeteners, flavors, or colors, and that gets my stamp of approval. They have a delicious product line including whey proteins, vegan proteins, pre-workout, recovery supplements, and recently they've added protein cookies. Their Naked Shake is made with their best-selling pea protein from U.S. and Canadian farms and medium-chain triglyceride oil. It mixes easily with water and tastes great. No GMO, no soy. It's vegan, certified gluten-free, no artificial sweeteners, flavors, or colors. It's available in chocolate, vanilla, strawberry, banana, and peanut butter blueberry. If you like to go really simple with your ingredients, try the Naked Whey or Naked Pea. The unflavored versions contain only one ingredient, and the flavored versions contain only 3 ingredients. Get your blender out and let me know your favorites. Go to nakednutrition.com and use promo code ACP to get 15% off on your first order at checkout. That's nakednutrition.com for 15% off your first order with promo code ACP. That code expires July 31st, 2022. Okay, so what is the solution? Where is it that we can actually let go of this perfectionistic loop that may be keeping the anxiety fires burning? Suppressing doesn't work. Always suppression makes things worse. And we can't really solve it with more thinking because the thinking has gotten us into trouble already. Dr. Hanscom says the key is to become aware of the depth and nature of your critical self-talk and create some space between you and these circuits. This is what we're always talking about here, right? Creating some space, slowing things down so that you have time to make decisions. And we can't make decisions if we have no space. So he says, writing down your thoughts and the awareness of them creates the needed space. Then you can use your conscious mind to redirect your attention to more pleasant choices. Just understanding the magnitude of the impact that perfectionism is having on the quality of your life really helps. So this is where we have to begin to let go, making space. And like myself, liking you to write things down, Dr. Hanscom is suggesting that you write down your thoughts because that shows that you have awareness of the thought. And with the awareness of the thought, we are moving out of rote thinking. We create some space between what we are doing and our actions or reactions. Or as he says, we create some space between you and these circuits. So give yourself a break and begin to write some of these things down. If you are feeling like you have had these thoughts about yourself, that you are stuck in perfectionism, that you have too high standards or, super strong work ethic, nothing wrong with having those unless they are holding you down and causing you to feel strangled or in danger of falling off because you're not meeting the self-inflicted standards. Remember, you are good enough. You don't have to worry about being an imposter. You are who you are. Nobody else can have that job. And you can make changes in your life. So get out of the victim mode and stop thinking that other people or the world or yourself are doing this to you on purpose. It could be, as he is suggesting, unconscious. But once we can shine the light of awareness on what we are doing, our thoughts, we give space for the unconscious to bubble up, and journaling is one of the best places for that to take place. I have many other episodes on journaling. You may want to re-listen to some of those. Finally, Dr. Hanscom says, decide to be happy. You have to use repetition to reprogram the unconscious. It entails creating a positive vision. You cannot get to happy while remaining perpetually judgmental. So what I want to say here is that judgment piece keeps us in a prison cell. Let it go. Notice when you are doing it. Write it down. That's how we let it go. We reprogram it by shining the light of consciousness on it and by writing it down, getting it out of us so our own eyes can see it and we can be actually aware of what it is we are saying to ourselves. I really hope that you will give some consideration to this idea of perfectionism possibly feeding your anxious cycle, because I hear it a lot and I know what I have experienced in my own life, and it is definitely a place where we can get stuck. I love being here with you guys, and I hope that if you have a question that you would like to hear answered on the show, that you would send me an email, anxietycoachespodcast@gmail.com. Before I read today's quote, I was wondering if you prefer the show without ads, or perhaps you might like to have access to the entire back catalog of over 600 episodes. Maybe you'd like some bonus meditation episodes. All of that and more are available for $5 a month with our premium Supercast membership. Go to anxietycoaches.supercast.com and join us ad-free today. The link will be in the show notes. And now for today's quote. Perfectionism is a disease. Procrastination is a disease. Action is the cure. And that's from Richie Norton. I'll be back in a few more days with another podcast. Until then, be well and aloha.
Thanks so much for joining us for today's episode of the Anxiety Coaches Podcast. Find more information at theanxietycoachespodcast.com.